Yeah, I
Cool.
can.
Is it
Yeah,
recording? I have no idea.
yeah, it's recording now.
Okay, there it
Yeah.
is. All right. Well, before I get into intro to BLoC, I guess you can have an intro to myself. I'm Tyler Trott. I'm currently a sophomore at Ontario Tech University studying data science. I'm also a student ambassador for a startup company in the Silicon Valley called the Company. You can definitely read a lot more about that on my LinkedIn and @sign.com and stuff like that. But also with the Company, I've learned how to develop with Flutter and Dart, as that is pretty much the basis of what we develop with. And along with that ride with Flutter and Dart, I've learned about a few of the state management solutions, one being BLoC. And I'm here to talk to you about BLoC today. So ignore the Uniqlo tab for now. It is going to be necessary. I wasn't shopping, but I might later. So intro to BLoC, welcome. If you guys would like, I can always come back for another session or two maybe and go over the intermediate and the advanced sessions for BLoC. I only go over a few things like BLoC itself, Qubit, Stream, and a few of the widgets that come along with BLoC. So it's not going to be that long of a session. I'm going to try and power through all of the slides because I don't like looking at slides. I prefer code. But I wanted to start my presentation with what is the best state management solution. And I'm sorry for giving you this answer, but there isn't specifically the best one. There's a best one for every situation, right? And I'm sorry if that isn't your opinion, but that is kind of how it goes with things like this. But first of all, what is BLoC itself? BLoC stands for Business Logic Component. Now, what on earth does that mean? Business logic, two separate things that we want to keep from the users. The business side, which is like the UI, the front end, and then the logic part. What is actually happening, the functionality, the back end, as some would call it. And then, of course, component. That component part is pretty much what is structuring your ideas, what is pulling your ideas and the functionality together for you. And that's pretty much BLoC in like a sentence, but it's a really long sentence. BLoC was designed by Google, and BLoC for Flutter was designed by this really great developer called Felix Angelov. I've put his GitHub there. I definitely recommend looking at his GitHub. It's really good, and you can see the code, of course, for BLoC. So moving on, just some of like the advantages of BLoC, kind of. It definitely makes your code really readable. I know developers nowadays really like to have their code readable. It's really easy to just skim through the lines and understand what functions are doing what, like really, really specific named functions and stuff like that. That's exactly what BLoC does, and you'll see that later on with my code. You can see that with the component part, it really brings your code together and structures it really nicely. And what happens when you have maintainable code that's structured really nicely means that it's really testable. It's really easily testable. And testing code is definitely a huge process that happens nowadays with software development. And what this also means for structured code is that it's scalable. And scalability is a huge thing, especially for apps when you go from 100 users to 1,000 to 1,000,000, right? And my last point that I have here, and Randall was talking about community earlier, is that just like the Flutter community is growing like rapidly, I've also noticed in the past few months alone that the BLoC community is growing insanely. Like I remember like looking up BLoC a couple months ago and not really finding that much. And then I come back like maybe a few weeks ago and stuff to, prepare for this presentation. There's like blogs, there's articles, there are tons of YouTube videos. So it's really good to see the community growing. And that's definitely one thing I really like about Flutter as well. It's just the community around it. I mean, that's why we're all here, right? It's a huge community. I'm going to take a second to drink water here. Okay. So what is BLoC good for? Why would I use BLoC? So if you want to answer that question, you kind of want to ask yourself, well, what am I doing in the first place with my app? And what you're asking yourself, what am I doing here, is pretty much asking what do I have here in this app that my user can interact with, which is the same. I've put it on the slide here. What is the state of the app? And that means that I have my app that does certain things. And obviously the user wants to use my app for those certain things. So you don't want to have a user, let's say, press a button and then absolutely nothing happens. That is the worst possible thing to have within your app. Like if I were to use an app and I click a button and nothing happens, like I'm either restarting the app or I'm gone. And having a state management solution really helps, because when a user interacts with your app, let's say they click a button and that button is supposed to retrieve data. What's happening while it's retrieving data is, let's say, one of those little spinner things where it's saying it's loading. That would take your app from its previous state to now a loading state. And once the app has either retrieved that data from pressing the button or has not been able to retrieve that data, it will put you in either a successfully loaded state or an error state. Okay, so one of the most important things about BLoC is the stream. And I know stream can at first be really intimidating, but it's actually a really simple concept. You can take stream and just think of it as a literal stream of water, where it's just starting from one place, it flows for a while, and then it finishes. And you can think of that just like just for BLoC, or pretty much any any computer sciencey process, to be honest. You have a sender and you're sending data, and you have a receiver. And one key note I wanted to mark about BLoC is that the stream are asynchronous. And asynchronous means that we're sending these packages of data, but the receiver doesn't actually know when they'll be receiving it. They're just listening for it. They're just looking for it. They're waiting. And that's pretty much the easiest way I know how to explain that. And I've actually done a small code on Dartpad. For those who don't know what Dartpad is, it's pretty much just this online, I don't want to call it an IDE, but you can just quickly make a Dart file on it or functionality like this and have it run. So I have two functions happening here. One is a stream function called data stream, and you'll see that it has async with the wildcard asterisk. And what that means is it's a function that's going to have asynchronous data, but the difference between async and the async wildcard asterisk is the async asterisk is going to allow me to always return a stream and also utilize the yield function. And I'm not going to play it right now. I kind of want to explain the code. It happened really fast. It's a really simple for loop. It's happening 10 times, which means I'm going to send 10 packages of data. So with every instance, you can see sent data package number, whatever the instance is. And what's really cool about asynchronous stuff, I've kind of cheated the system, but just to get an understanding, when I send this package, I'm going to delay the receiver receiving it by 3 seconds. Really simple thing. And the yield is probably one of the most important parts, because you can think of yield as the water in the stream, where you have the sender and the yield is pushing that data down the river to whoever's supposed to receive it. And of course, that data stream is the sender. And if you look at the main function now, the receiver is here. And just an async function, because we're not returning a stream. We're actually just returning an int that we're converting to string. You'll see in a second. So you want to first initialize the stream, data stream, or sorry, you want to initialize the variable stream and then pass the function data stream into it. And one of the attributes to a stream variable is stream.listen. And what that stream.listen is doing is waiting for the actual data packages to arrive, which means we're waiting. We don't know when the packages are going to get here, but once they get here, we're going to do this. And that this is print received data number, whatever the instance is. And I just do a toString because it's just an int, because it's just a little for loop with ints. So let's see this happen in action. So I'm going to press run. There's the first instance. So I sent my data package number 1, and then 3 seconds later, I
Hey,
received.
Tyler, can you increase the font size?
I don't know. This is a video. I can like zoom in. Is that a little bit better?
Yeah, much better.
All
Yeah.
right. How's that?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm sending my data package within the current instance, and then 3 seconds later, I'm receiving it. So let's count the next one. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. Perfect. Okay, so the sent part is the first part of the stream. The 3 seconds is going down the river, and the received part is the receiver. Okay, whew, that's stream. Now, after seeing that, you're probably asking, why do we need streams? If you go back to when I was explaining what BLoC is for, you'll remember that I'm saying we have a user that's clicking a button and then waiting for something to happen. During that part, when you click the button, the app is listening or waiting for that data to be received, to actually do something. So that listen is waiting for an interaction from the user. So when the user clicks the button, the app knows that it has to do something. And for example, I've done another Dart pad here. I like Dart pad. Let me zoom in before it starts, just to show what you can do with it. Instead of 10 instances, I've done 3 this time. And so when I receive the third data package, Here, let me pause it on the third one. Okay, cool. So when we get that third instance, I'm saying if the received data is equal to 3, then let's do this rather than the first 2 received data package, whatever the instance is. And I know this is like this is really far below. This is really basic. This is as basic as it gets. But what I like to do is build on top of these things slowly. So I hope everyone understands stream and what you can do with specific events. And I'm gonna let that one simmer for a second while I drink some more water. Are there any questions? I can't see the chat.
Yeah, quick question, sort of related.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever you open the stream in main, for example, you have to close it as well?
That is correct. So I'll actually be going over that later on, if that's okay.
Okay. No, absolutely.
Good catch, though. Very good catch.
Thank you.
Okay. I think we can move on now.
I have just a quick question.
Yep.
Only because you used yield, so implicitly you will return a string or not?
So the yield I just initialize that I as an int in the for loop up here. And so when I'm pushing the I, it's just pushing the ints.
Yeah, understood. I was just asking, I think it's more about a Dart question. It's whenever you use yield, you will return like a string, correct?
I actually don't know.
So
does it return a string is what you're asking?
So for streams, you can see in the syntax, in the signature of the function, it's async star. So that's for streams, and if you just use async, it's a future.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, is that the question? Sorry.
I think so.
Does that answer it?
the yield pushes an event down the stream. Don't know if that's helpful, Leonardo.
The yield is just pushing whatever I'm telling it to push. So because I is an int, it's just pushing the ints. And data stream in of itself is the stream, which is why you have to initialize this variable as a stream, because the async asterisk means that I'm returning the function itself as a stream. Does that
Understood.
make sense? There's a lot of streams going on. I hope you can.
Yeah, it makes sense. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, cool. I think we can move on. Okay, so a really cool part about BLoC is a qubit. And probably the only part about this that I would explain right now is that qubit is like a portion of BLoC. Or a formal way to explain it is BLoC extends qubit, which means that qubit is like just a smaller version of BLoC. It doesn't do as much, but it has some of its capabilities. And just instead of, I think my next slide explains it. There we go. Instead of BLoC, this is taken directly from the BLoC pub.dev page as well, by the way. When you have your UI, this is the person pressing a button, for instance, that's the event. And the little bubbles indicate the stream, that there's a stream happening. For BLoC, when someone clicks a button, the UI is now streaming that event to BLoC. And that's BLoC listening for the data. It's waiting to receive that stream. And what it does in return is stream a state back, which means that I click this button and I want to retrieve data. And so BLoC is now saying, okay, while we're waiting for that data, here's the loading screen or loading state. And now instead, in contrast, qubit takes a function. So you're going to see a little bit later, I play around with the Flutter demo app where it's just like an incremental thing. And you're going to see that it just passes the function of increment into qubit. And qubit in reply streams the state back, just like how BLoC sends the stream, the state as a stream. Just going to stay on this screen a little bit longer. Okay. So you don't have to really read this. What the important part about this is pretty much explaining what's a good way to summarize this page. Okay. So this is pretty much saying that you'll need the previous state that happens, and you need your event, which is pushed by emit, and then it will push out the new state for you. This will all make sense during the demo. This is why I write all the code, because I hate slides. Describing everything with words sucks. So here's the Flutter demo app. And for all of those who are wondering or don't know what the Flutter demo app is, it's pretty much what's happening on that Android device there. It's just this one screen where it says you push the button this many times, and then there's a 0. And then on the little bottom right there's a button. It's got a plus sign on it. And every time you click that button, that 0 will increment to 1, and then 2, and then 3. And that's pretty much it. But we can really learn a lot about BLoC from this demo app. And you're probably wondering how. This has nothing to do with BLoC, but it really explains a few questions that you as the BLoC developer want to ask yourself. So let's look at this counter app as a BLoC app. We first want to ask ourselves, what is the initial state of the counter? Does anyone know? This is now an interactive session. I hope everyone's ready.
0.
It is 0. That is the initial state of the counter. Now we have to ask ourselves, because this is BLoC, what can the user do with this app?
In your screen, increment?
Yes.
Or you can make decrement?
No, this Flutter app only has the increment. So the only thing that the user can do with this app, other than close it, of course, is press that blue button. And the last question is, so those previous two questions were the business side of BLoC. What can the user do? What's the business? And then the logic part, what do we need to have in order for the user to actually have that experience? So what logic do we need? That's kind of a harder question. Don't think about it too much though.
It'd be like the current state plus one type of thing.
Yeah, that's it. Perfect. Oh my goodness, we're thinking like BLoC devs over here. Okay. So I think it's time to show some real life code. I'm kind of bored of these slides anyway. So I'm just going to minimize that. Okay, so I have my iOS simulator. I transitioned from Windows to Mac, so I'm sorry if like I can't find my way around because it happened in like a matter of a few days. So here's my example app of Qubit and BLoC working together. Before we get into anything, I should actually Flutter run it. Let's see if I'm in the correct thing here. No, I'm not. CD BLoC. I did not spell that right. Sorry. And then I can Flutter run it. Okay, while this is running, I'm going to take a sip of water. It's super hot out. Okay, so let's start from the top. I'm importing the BLoC package because we want to use BLoC. And I'm also importing the BLoC app and BLoC example.dart, which is this page here because we're going to navigate to it using a button later on. And I have it twice for some reason, so let's just delete that. It's all good. And I don't think I'm using Dart UI either. Okay, so let's look at this app. I think it's fine to talk about it while that loads and thinks about its life. So what should we do first? What's the first question that we ask ourselves for the demo app? What is the initial state? Well, the initial state here, we want to actually declare as 0 right here. So this is our initial state. Oh, I also forgot to talk about that. We had to create the class that extends Qubit, and then we defined it as an int because our counter is just an integer value. And that integer value is initialized as 0, stated here. And then we're creating an event called increment that happens every time that we click the button. So we're then defining what increment does using this emit function. And just like whoever answered it correctly is state plus 1.
Tyler, Lens has a question for you.
Sure, what's the question?
Yeah, maybe you're going to get to it later, but what if like here it's a simple initial state, right? It's just a value of 0. What if, it's a much more complex state? You have like to, I don't know, like a user object where perhaps it's null, or I don't know, like something more complex. Is that?
Sure, I will be covering kind of something like that. I kind of stay on the lines of the counter app because this is just like an intro to BLoC thing. But I can definitely show you where that complexity would come into play. Is that okay?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you.
Cool. Okay. So that's our event. That's what's going to happen when the user interacts with our app. This state plus 1, because our state is initialized here as 0. Okay, so let's scroll down a little bit. Some wonderful UI going on.
Sumit is asking a question. Where is state coming from? Where is it defined?
Right here. This is 0. That is state.
So it's a part of the qubit.
Yep. Cool. Does that answer it? Okay. So now let's get into the code. And this code might actually look a little familiar because it's pretty much the same code that I wrote in that dartpad video thing that I showed you on the slides. So we want to first, and I think someone actually asked about the opening and closing of the stream, and this is where I actually start doing it. So the way to understand what a stream subscription is to think, what is a Netflix subscription type, kind of. And what happens when I start a subscription with a Netflix, I get to view all of the what's on Netflix, shows and movies and stuff. And then, of course, if I don't want to watch any more movies or shows on Netflix, I just cancel my subscription. And that's what's happening here. So, yep, that was a very good catch for whoever actually caught it on the dart pad. But anyway, when I first initialize my subscription, you'll see this dot listen that's happening. And we saw the dot listen in the dart pad. And this print that's happening is pretty much passing what the interaction was. So the interaction was on pressed. So I press the button. So what happens when I press a button? And I go down here and I call it qubit.increment. And I increment it twice just to show that I can do it twice. I can do it as many times as I want. And just like how I delayed it by 3 seconds earlier on the dart pad, I have it set to 0 because I'm lazy and I don't feel like waiting around. And then I cancel my subscription. So let's see that actually happen. Let me pull up my console here. Boop. Okay, so here's my button. Click me to see Qubit in action. And there it is. So it was initialized as 0. And because I clicked the button with the event of increment, it takes it, increments it to 1. And then it does it again and increments it to 2. And it came instantly because I don't have an actual delay of any seconds now. And that's Qubit. That's Qubit in action. Really simple. And let us, was there a question?
So Tyler,
Yep.
so you're listening to the stream literally just for the time of this, like from the moment, you know, within that on press.
Yep. Exactly.
That usually how you would do it in BLoC. You would listen to, or would you listen like in a greater scope?
Now that's a really good question. I was actually going to cover that in the next demo. You guys are like one step ahead of me constantly, but that's good.
Nice. All right, thanks.
Explain that.
I have another question.
Go ahead.
Even though you use future.delayed, as you pass 0 to it, it does not make difference at all, right? Because I read your comment there and you say use this not to cancel the subscription, but it's not delaying anything at all. So
Sorry, that was a comment.
I know, I understood what you said, but does this line makes any difference or not?
This one, oh yeah, for sure. If you, let's say, want to compile, let's say a stream that has more than just 10 instances, because I mean, let's face it, you're not going to be sending only 10 integers. You want to kind of give it a second to really compile and give itself time to think, because there are times where you are doing more than just incrementing something, right? There are times where you're doing a function that could take a few milliseconds to work out, or even entire seconds if you're doing, let's say, pulling an entire database, for instance. So this delayed function can be really helpful for things like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
So you're gonna sometimes delay the closing of the stream until the computation is
Exactly.
long computations. Okay, yeah.
Yep. Okay, so now it's time to navigate to my BLoC page, which looks exactly like my Qubit page, except it is all BLoC. So let me just do this. Okay, so here's my BLoC page. It almost looks exactly like my Qubit page, except now we have our async asterisk, which is really cool. So this all looks the same. It all looks and feels the same. And that's why I showed the dart pad. I thought it'd be a good idea. So of course, we want to first ask ourselves, what do we want the initial state to be? And because it's just a counter app, we want it to be 0. Oh, and before we do that, we now actually have to create an enum called counter event, because this is just the event that we want to happen or have happen. And we're going to call a function called increment. And we'll get down there a little bit in the code later. And when we create the class, we want to extend a block. And oh, I totally forgot to show you guys. I'm actually using an extension called block. And you can see that it was made by Felix Angelov. Highly recommend it. It's super useful. And okay, back to the code. Where was I? Oh, I'm now in the qubit one. Hold on. Block. There we go. Back to business. Okay. Now we want to map an event that happens upon interaction, which means that the user has now clicked our button and we want an event to happen, which looks very oddly familiar to what we've already seen. Except this time we're calling a little bit more, and we're actually passing our event that we declared up here into this function that we've called stream, map event to state. This is exactly what we saw in the dartpad. And we're yielding state plus 1, which is just incrementing the current state by 1.
And Tyler, before we were returning, correct? Before we were in the non-stream, can we go back to the qubit quickly, if you don't mind?
Yep. Here? Or do you mean up here?
Yeah, up there. So you were.
So with qubit,
that was like yeah. Go ahead.
With qubit, we're not listening for a stream. We are listening for a function. And then with BLoC, we're listening for a stream or an event. Right? Do you remember the little diagram with the bubbles and stuff?
Yeah. So the one way was like a synchron or not stream, and the other one was a stream.
Yeah. So the stream one was our BLoC returning the stream, and then qubit is returning a stream, yes, but listening for a function. And BLoC is listening for a stream as well.
And I guess my question, where is the stream that we're returning here?
For BLoC or qubit?
For qubit.
Qubit is
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks.
And I heard another question.
Yeah. So I think about the qubit is. Let me rephrase it.
Sure.
I don't know if it makes sense, but when we're talking about like events that we're sending in qubit, you use emit with a value, right? Mm-hmm. But in BLoC, you have to declare like an event type.
Yep.
And you receive this event type. Is it possible to receive like a payload together? You know, you're emitting an event with that value. I don't know, maybe something the user tried to input on the screen or something like this.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Definitely. So what you're asking is kind of more of like an advanced type of level of BLoC. I didn't want to get too deep because it definitely gets a lot more confusing the deeper you go into it. So I'm trying to keep it as simple as possible, where we're kind of like slowly going up steps rather than sprinting up steps. But yeah, what you're saying is totally correct. You can do that.
Because one of the main questions that I have, it's like when I'm studying BLoC, mm-hmm. The simplest scenario works just properly, and like when I'm trying to adapt it to like my app or something like this, it gets a little bit confusing, because I do not have like a BLoC for a primitive type. I use like complex objects, mm-hmm. and I'm not really sure how much blocks should I have in my application. You know,
that's
like
a really good
one BLoC to one screen. This relation, it's kind of confusing, like how to manage the different states that I have and how to make them work together. You know?
Here's something I like to tell myself. For every interaction that the user can do with my event, you want to have a response to that interaction. So every interaction should have a BLoC. Yeah. And I'll show kind of a more complex version of the BLoC in qubit. It will be live code just like this, except now I'm declaring the block in its own place. So you'll see that in just a second, and then see if that will answer your questions of where you can actually like initialize those type of variables and stuff.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. Cool. Is that everyone? I think that's everyone. Does anyone remember where I was? Was I on the stream subscription for this one? I
Just
think
about, yeah, just creating the block, basically. I think you're just starting.
Cool. So what we want to do, we want to, in our screen, first declare or initialize a variable that I called block as our counter block, which is this class up here. And once that happens, we now have our initial state. And just like the qubit and just like Dartpad, we want to subscribe to Netflix so that we can watch some videos, whatever shows. I keep thinking of YouTube. Watch shows and movies. But the only difference is, or one of the differences, is now we have this attribute called add. And we can actually add a specific event, just like whoever was just asking about the events. We can actually add those blocks or events to the reaction, or sorry, interaction. So if I had more than just increment, I could call, let's say, increment, decrement, multiply. I can add all of those events to this listen. And so just like in the qubit one, I'm incrementing it twice. I'm adding my counter event dot increment, which I'm calling up here. Okay, let's scroll back down. And then just like in qubit, I don't have any delay because I'm lazy. And then we cancel our subscription because we have nothing else to watch on Netflix. And oh, let's see it happen. And here's something cool. What BLoC will do automatically is actually close the state itself. So when I switched to this BLoC page, it completely erased my qubit state. So when I click this button, you'll see that it initializes back to 0, right? Because I had initialized my state as 0 again. And then I can click this as many times as I want. And that's BLoC. And that's kind of like that's a really simple level of blocking qubit. Is that
so? Tyler, what
Yep.
if you didn't want to initialize it to reinitialize it to 0 every time?
That's a good question, and I'm gonna get into that. I swear I'm gonna get into these questions. You guys are like 2 steps ahead of me.
No worries.
Go
back just a little bit higher to the, just scroll this page up just yeah.
Just like that. Can you guys see that? Is that okay? Let me.
Yeah.
How do I do that? There we go. Bang. Is it okay if I run to the bathroom? I need to use the bathroom. Is that you guys can talk amongst yourselves, I guess, while I wait, while you wait for me to return. I will be right back, I promise.
Thank you.
I guess we play some music now.
Someone can sing, actually. That'd be better.
Yeah, I don't think software developers are good singers.
It's so prejudiced of you, but anybody here you actually has experience with using BLoC before? Yes.
Yeah, looks like Case. Is it how I pronounce your name?
I've been using it.
Yeah, it's right.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And you have any comments in that regard?
It's so great, but I feel I'm moving to Redux in the next project. I want to try Redux too.
Is there a particular thing that was pushing you away from BLoC?
It's the way I structure my app right now is like kind of every page have its own qubit or its own block, and there is a main block for the router, for the main router,
Right.
and there is another block for the authentication state of the user, another block for the theme. I think that's it. And for every page, there's its own block. But I always need the state of the authentication in every page, technically. So I need to listen to the outside block inside this page block, which is kind of, I feel it's becoming more redundant, and I feel like Redux will help me overcome that somehow.
All right, welcome back, Tyler.
Whew, thank you. I've been holding that one for a while. I'm sorry. Okay. So we just saw Qubit and BLoC in action for the first time. So now a good question to ask is, when should we use Qubit and BLoC? And I think that's what the topic was before I got back, if I'm not mistaken. I have no idea. So like I was saying earlier when I answered someone's question, for every interaction that the user can do, you want to have a block attached to it. So you want an event to happen every time someone clicks a button rather than them clicking a button and then nothing happens. And one thing about BLoC that I like occasionally is you don't actually have to use Qubit all the time. Using Qubit, though, is a lot better because instead of using BLoC all the time, it's like, think of you wanting to cross the street. And this is like a one-lane street in your neighborhood. And you want to get to the other side. And you ask yourself, man, let me take my truck to get to the other side rather than walking. And using that truck is like using BLoC every time for every small event. So that's why we like Qubit. Qubit's like walking to the other side of the street. You'll get there and you're not using as much effort or power or processing time because you got to get in the truck, you got to turn the truck on, you know all of it. And here's a really cool thing. You can actually see, wow, I've spoken about Netflix a lot. Maybe I have a problem. But a cool thing that you can think of in everyday life of Netflix is when you're in Netflix and you type in, let's say, a character, you're going to have recommendations. And I can actually show you an example of this I found on my Mac, which is right here, this little spotlight search. So every time I type in a character, an actual suggestion comes up. And you can kind of think of this as Qubit happening because you're taking a very small event or you're taking a small function. And what happened here, what the function was on changed of the text field, it took the letter and then it found other very, I guess, highly used thing that I use, which in this case would be terminal. And then it would give you right back as a response to that interaction, a suggestion. And then if I do it again, maybe TH, I don't know, the bay, and then it will do it every time. But the way to think about BLoC, and this is why Uniqlo is up. What a nice website, very chunky. And here's the search bar, same as the search bar you just saw. When I type in a character, nothing happens. And that's okay, because what's happening, it's waiting for an entire event to happen. So I'm going to put in an entire word and then search for it, rather than one small letter and then it's going to suggest something, or two letters and then suggest something. This would be BLoC. I'm not sponsored by Uniqlo, but if Uniqlo would like to sponsor me, I'd be more than happy to. Anyway, back to the slides. Boop. So here's my advice. You don't have to take it if you don't want to, but I definitely suggest starting with Qubit because I mentioned this in like the first two slides. I said that BLoC was super scalable when you go from 100 users to 1,000 users to 1,000,000. You can go from Qubit to BLoC, and that's it, because you saw how similar the code was for Qubit and BLoC. It's very similar, almost non-existence of a difference. So I'm
Tyler,
so sorry. Oh, is there a question?
yeah, I'm sorry. So in the two examples that you just shown, thank you for that. You had the spotlight search, which was kind of stream-like, Every interaction caused a reaction.
Yep.
And then you had that clothing site where it didn't react right away. It took an input. So the second example, the clothing store, that was kind of the case of a qubit, if I understand correctly.
No, that was the block, because it's waiting for an entire thing to happen before actually reacting to it. So it's taking in an event rather than, we can think of it back to the walking across the street. The qubit one, where it's just right there, all I have to do is a few steps, which is just a few characters in that case with the spotlight search. That's the qubit. The block, however, is taking in one big chunk and then doing it. So let's say I want to put my truck on the highway. That would be a lot more.
I was thinking of it as the constant flux of information going towards, the state changing or whatever. As that was like kind of a block where you have like the spotlight, where you have every time there is a change, every that's kind of like a stream. That's kind of how I had it in mind. Yeah. I'm not seeing.
And you're right. So if you remember, I said that you can actually use block for every time, but you want to use qubit because it takes less processing power.
So the qubit then in this case would take every on change of that text field and call that function basically.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And then block's going to wait until you're done, whatever you're doing, whatever you're done typing, and then it will execute the event. So if, let's say, my word isn't that long, like I know I'm just going to type in, what's a nice show on Netflix that everyone knows? I guess The 100, that's the first one that came to mind. I'm only going to type in THE. And Netflix is going to say, okay, cool, you want The 100 because that's what everyone else wants. And that's one of the closest searches with just the. Using just each individual letter. Rather than me typing in, now what's a long title? Just think of one with a really long title.
Star Trek: The Next Generation.
There you go. Perfect. That's a really long title. And if you were to do qubit with that one, it would take forever, right? Because it's taking every letter. But with block, I type in the whole thing and boom, it's there. That's it. That's what you got.
Gotcha.
I know those two examples weren't the best in the world, but they kind of give an idea.
Yeah, no, it's kind of this thing, I guess, where we have to use it more to understand it.
Exactly. It's just like math, right? Where you actually have to do the equations and stuff to learn how to do it, I guess. I know that's kind of a ridiculous thing.
It's kind of with qubit, you're doing like a more imperative way, as a function, you just write that like play this function, and with block is more like asynchronous. This event will be processed, and then the stream will return the value.
That was wonderful. That was a good way to put it. You should write a book or something on block. That was good. Okay. So in the beginning, I kind of went over, I'm going to talk about block, qubit, stream, and then the widgets. So I apologize for the next 3 slides. I swear these are the last 3 slides, so just bear with me. I know they're really wordy. I won't really go through each line. But everything in Flutter is a widget. And I'm pretty sure that we all know that by now because we're all Flutter devs. So one of the first block concepts is going to be the block provider. Now, the block provider provides lazily a block from the parent widget to its children. Now, what does that mean? You can kind of think, I use a lot of analogies because I find that's the best way to explain things. Lazily means like you can think of a teenager. A teenager is not going to do their chores unless you tell them to. And that's exactly what block provider is doing. Block provider is not going to provide you anything until you tell it to. And you can actually manually set this lazy parameter. It's just a Boolean variable. And another thing, I brought it up really briefly in the last demo, is that block will automatically close the state for you. So when you go to the next screen, it won't carry your carry the state over. And block provider version, you don't really need to worry about it. That will help you take the state to the next screen. Anyway, let's move on. I'm tired of looking at so many words. Block Builder is the next one. It pretty much does exactly like what it says it does. It will build the UI. So you can take, for instance, every time the counter was incremented, it was being rebuilt. But because I used a really simple version, we weren't using Block Builder. But don't worry, I've made another demo. Oh my goodness, excuse me. Another demo app that uses all of these concepts. And what's happening with Block Builder, it's listening for those interactions. And this is what is, returning the response to that interaction. And a really cool thing that I like about Block Builder is that it's a pure function. I don't really know if anyone knows what that means, but pretty much it's a function where it only will utilize the variables or whatever you pass through the parameters inside of itself. So if I have an integer, just like, let's say, my counter, I pass the integer through my function. I'm only using that integer inside the function. I won't return the function with an integer plus some random global variable string. That will make it not so pure, which is why it's called a pure function. I think that's really cool. I don't know if that's really a highlight. And the Block Builder also has the build when. So if you remember way back in like the second Dartpad video, I have on the third data package, it will return something really awesome or something like that. This is what the build when is. It's saying, okay, what's this previous state and what's the current state? This is the current state that we have to do something really awesome. That's what the build when is. Okay, last slide. This one's really short because I got bored of writing so many words. Block Listener. It's pretty much Block Builder, except it's only called once per state. And this actually doesn't talk about the first state. So you have to do Block Builder first, and then you have to call the Block Listener. You don't really have to understand it too much. We'll go over it in the demo code. The demo code. And Block Builder, just like Block Builder, Listener has a listen when function. So if I want something cool to happen in a specific state, I can just tell it to do so. And time for some code. And I think that's the last slide as well. So,
Leonardo has a question.
Yep. What's the question?
It's just a simple question, but are block singletons? I was just asking myself, because the block carries a state, and how would I use this state to between different screens? If I should have like one instance of a block between my whole application, that kind of stuff. Because I use lots of Redux, but in front end, and we have this concept like the single source of truth, and you have like a whole huge store, and it's like in all your application, and I don't know if it really matches with block concept, and it gives me lots of doubts.
So this block provider .version is what I believe you're talking about. This .version will kind of, for a lack of better words, will kind of cache what the state is, and you're able to pass that state into the next screen or whatever screen you want it to go to. And remember, with every interaction, there's supposed to be a block component. So all of the block components are individually named. So one would be like, I don't know, get t-shirts or get pants or things like that, right? And you can actually pass that parameter, or sorry, not parameter, the state into the next screen or wherever you need it to go using .version. I don't know if I use .version in the demo code. You might have me there. Did that answer your question?
Kind of.
Yeah, kind of. Sorry. I
Case?
think you beat me on that one.
Case has a question.
Yep.
I did. I wanted to add on him, but he already mentioned it. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Cool. Okay, are we ready to get to some code? This is favorite part. I get so excited for the code. So I think I have to let me. Sorry, 1 second. Let me navigate to the other thing here. And I'm going to go to lib. I'm going to cancel out of this one. Oh, I just completely closed Visual Studio. Sorry. my
I
lack
have
of knowledge. Sorry.
I totally feel you there. I often switch to my Mac and I have the same issue.
Okay, thank you.
The quick question, if you don't mind. Is there like instance where you kind of don't want the states to switch too fast? I don't know if what I'm saying makes sense.
Are you talking about the delay? What's happening?
Yeah, like for example, if you're coming out of no, sorry, I don't have a good example right now, but like, yeah, is there an instance where you'd say like, okay, well, I don't want to push that state like from that previous state,
Yeah.
unless there's like, or whenever I come from that state, I want at least like 2 seconds delay, for example.
Well, yeah, you can always use that future.delayed function, but if I think what you're trying to say is you want this event to happen with an interaction, but you want to wait until another event happens. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, like for example, if I were to say I want to show a loading screen in between async computations, and I absolutely want that loading screen to be shown for at least 2 seconds, for example. I don't want it to just flash off the screen. I want it for 2 seconds. Every time I show loading, it has to stay for 2. So is that something that's easily feasible?
So this is some really complex coding you're talking about. I'll show it right here. I'm just going to cut that delay thing in between these two events, and then I'm just going to like paste it right here. I know. I'm sorry. I took it from
Randall actually mentioned the bouncing API. I think that's part of RxDart, and you can add that to your stream if you want. Add delay.
Okay, yeah, that's good.
Does that make sense?
Oh, I love that. I love that.
Package has it, so you can use it.
Okay, so we're on to our last demo app. I'm sorry I only made a few apps. I know I'm so lame. Where do I want to go here? Oh, here we go. Sorry, I'm in the wrong folder. Okay, so we're now on to the actual good chunk. This is what a real like block would look like, or a block or usage of block would look like. So first I have to declare this class counter state, like how I did in the beginning in like one of the screens, except now I'm actually separating the business and logic. Now all of my business, or my UI, is happening in the main.dart, while all my logic is happening within this counter state file and this counter qubit file, and I wish they would open up together. There we go. So what's happening in this class, I'm declaring two variables. One's going to be my counter, which is here, and then one's going to be a Boolean was incremented. And I thought I'd throw that in just to show that I can have more than one event, because I got kind of bored with just one event happening. And I don't know, I'm kind of excited for what was incremented is going to do. And then because of the null safety implementation from Dart, as Randall was talking about earlier, we want to have this, my two variables passed not being null, because that would suck. So I pass the current instance of counter and the current instance of was incremented. So what's happening with these two variables? It's a very good question. So I'm going to say exactly what's going to happen to these two variables here in this page. So I'm going to declare a counter qubit class that extends qubit, and then whatever the state I want it to be in. So I have to, of course, as always, have an initial state value. And this is the way I would declare it, using actual block and stuff. And of course, I set counter to 0. And then this was incremented to false because when we first initialize the counter, it's not going to be incremented immediately. So I'm just going to have it set to false. Now, just like what we saw in the previous demo app, we have to create an event that can happen. And then we want to have what it emits. And the emit is going to be the counter and then the state plus 1. I know, this is ridiculous. How could this possibly be? And because we are now incrementing the state, we're going to set this to true. To true. Come on, let me show it to true. Is it fine, by the way? Is it too small? I just realized I'm not like maximized here.
Yeah, if you increase the font size,
yeah, sorry about that. I'm so used to just looking at it like this.
Okay.
Should I go back to the other page as well, just to show what's happening? Everyone got it?
So, no, I was talking about the font size. If you increase the font size, it'll be more visible.
Sure. What is the command on Mac to increase the font size? I just know how to zoom in.
Command plus. Yeah. Command plus works. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Whoa, there's more commands than what I know. Okay, is this fine? Can we see this? This is chunky. I like this.
When you use emit with like a complex object, you will always have to emit like the object mutated, right? And there you're just constructing a new version of this object. Does it make sense?
So let me see if I answer this correctly. So going back to the user interacting with the app, we want to have an event happen for them, which is increment. And we also want to send back a streamed state, which would be the emit. So we now want to actually respond to that interaction. And this is what's happening in emit. Does that answer your question? Did I understand your question right?
Kind of. I was just asking if when I use Qubit with a complex object, will I always have to emit a new instance of this state, like a mutated state? I like this approach because you bring like a mutability to your code. So you will always construct a new version of your state. You will not take like your current state and set something into it. You will mutate this object. You will return a new one. But I'm asking if this has to be like this or not. Because I was thinking about like a more complex object with a few with more parameters to the constructor, and how will this code scale, you know?
So you're asking for, instead of these primitive variables like int and bool, are you saying do you want more like what you said, complex variables, and then pass those?
Not really, but if a counter state had like 5 variables or 7, this constructor would be bigger, you know? So you have to pass like all whole 5 parameters.
But if you don't want, you don't actually have to have it as required. You can set your null safety, I believe, to nullable. If I have that right, I haven't watched Randall's video yet. So you don't actually have to pass all of them. I just have these two set as required, so I don't run into any null safety issues. So no, you don't have to pass the attributes every time, if that's what you're saying.
Someone has a question. I have a question to
sure.
Chase, I think. Chase.
I think Tyler, I think Leonardo is asking about, like, you have the current state right now as 0 and false.
Yep.
If you only want to change the counter to 1, do you need always to instantiate a new state? This is how he is asking.
Yeah, that is a good question. Now I understand. Yes, you do.
Couldn't you? That was actually my exact question. Couldn't you say like, part of the increment, like as the parameter to increment, I'm giving you the state that's going to be changed, and
Yep.
then within that emit function, do the counter +1.
Yep.
You see,
Mm-hmm.
you could do that.
Yeah. Exactly. Okay, now I understand. Yes, yes to all those questions. We can do that.
Okay, you could do that, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Is that it? Did we clear that up?
Is that bad? Is that like not recommended? Should you do a new object every time? Is there a reason why you wouldn't do that?
I mean, this is just the way I do it. I think programming's totally whatever you feel most comfortable doing. I just like doing all of this to make sure that I have my assets, contained, and I have it all organized. I just like seeing organization.
Fair enough.
But
as I said, it's really nice because you bring immutability to your code. You're always constructing new versions of your state, so it brings like the concept of the pure function.
Yeah.
You won't mutate your parameter or something like this.
That's true.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so now that we understand all of that, all of that gobbledygook, let's go to the actual main functionality of the app. So starting at the top here, you're going to start to see some really weird stuff. This is kind of like bordering like intermediate stuff, but I wanted to throw it in here just to show you what it would look like in reality. So I have my material app, which is pretty much the chunk, the basis of your main screen or the screen that you're looking up here on my simulator. And you'll notice that it kind of looks exactly like the Flutter demo app, or I tried anyway. I just have the button here because that's too far. Anyway, I have my material app wrapped with BLoC Provider. And if you remember what BLoC Provider is, it's lazily providing a block for the state that I want it to be in. And what's really cool with that BLoC extension that I showed earlier, if I highlight this and I double click or right click on Windows and click refactor, you'll have a long list of wrapping with specific things. But when you have the BLoC extension, you can actually wrap with BLoC Builder, BLoC Listener, BLoC Consumers, really deep down in BLoC. But you can also wrap with BLoC Provider, which I've done here. And with BLoC Provider, I want my counter qubit state, which is from here. Oh, wait, from the other one. Oh, it closed. Whatever. And then we're creating our build context with our counter qubit state. So we're providing the build context with that counter qubit state. And right now, the counter qubit state, because I've just loaded the app, is initialized as 0. Does that make sense? And that's BLoC Provider. Okay, cool. So I'm going to scroll down a little lot here. Do we want the no, we don't want that one just yet. Here we go. Okay, so here's another BLoC Provider happening. Here's my interaction from the user of the app. So when they click the button, I'm going to call BLoC Provider because now I want to provide.
Just a time check. You have 10 more minutes.
This is the last page. I'm almost done. We're good.
Awesome.
So I'm going to call BLoC Provider because now I want to build this. I want to build the same context, but with my new UI, my new counter value. And I'm just going to call my event increment. And when I click it, it will do just that, increment. Where is it? Oh, I forgot that I closed it. Well, it's going to call the event that I had listed with state +1 and the was incremented set to true. That is what's being called here when I click this button. Now, if you remember way back to the Dart pad, when something happens at a specific time, I want to show that off with another block builder. So this one, as you can kind of see if you're reading through it, and this is what this is what I meant about the readability. It's really easy to see what's happening and when. So this block builder is taking my previous state, my counter qubit, and I'm passing my current state, which is counter state. and then I'm going to build the context, blah, 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 blah. And then if the counter is equal to 3, I'm going to return a text called "it must work" if you've gotten here. And oh, by the way, the counter value is, and then I'm going to pass the counter value there. And I think there's one more thing I wanted to show. Here we go, my block listener. So now I have my block listener, just like the so you'll notice that the block listener is almost like the block builder, but the block listener only happens once per state, like I had said on the slides. So I'm passing the previous state and the current state, and then the listener is going to build just the UI part, or sorry, just the counter part, rather than building the whole page again. And when the was incremented Boolean variable is set to true, I'm going to show my snack bar, and then it's going to say incremented successfully. So let's actually see this in action. Wow, that was awesome. And that is my counter app with BLoC. Oh, and there it is with the 3. That's cool. Something else happened when I got to another value. Okay, and that's it. That is intro to BLoC. Are there
Awesome presentation, Tyler. Thank you.
Thank you.
It was a good introduction to BLoC. I mean, somebody like me who has never used BLoC, I think this is a great overview. And great questions from everybody who joined.
Oh, yeah.
Lens, Kay, and Leonardo, Randall. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for all the questions.
Thank you, Tyler. Thank you. That was great. Go
Thank
on
you
for another hour and a half.
Presentation.
Yeah, I can talk forever. I'm sorry. I get it from Randall.
He's a good Flutter GD to look up to for sure. Yeah, and it's a cool package he shared. Stream transform. That's pretty cool. I didn't know about that package.
Here, and I'll actually put the pub.dev link in the chat for everyone to look into themselves.
Yeah, there's a number of great packages in the pub that were built by the Dart team. And so they have high quality, they're highly maintained as Dart slowly changes or quickly changes. And so if you find any one of these, like the ones I linked to, click on the publisher and it'll tell you the other 20 packages that are essentially just more stuff for Dart. They're done by the Dart team. And that's important to know that. Package collection, for example, package async, both done by the Dart team, just stuff that didn't fit in the core. But it's just as legitimate, just as useful as a lot of the stuff that the Dart team actually generates. So look for that kind of stuff.
I've actually recently used Stream Transform. It's part of is it like, because there's one that's part of async as well? It's like another one? That's weird. Yes, just
I'm gonna have to look into the stream transform package that you linked, Sid.
I've had an instance where. Sorry, go ahead, Randall.
I just want to say I don't want to leave everybody with the impression that I'm poo-pooing all the other packages. I'm just saying the ones that the Dart team did probably have better test coverage and things like that. So that's all.
No, it's just weird because there's literally, as part of the async package, there's a stream transfer. There is a, like, you can call dot transform, I think, on a stream, and then it's like kind of the same thing, I think, or maybe not. I have no idea. But I've had an instance where I was playing with streams. I find it super interesting, but sometimes it's a bit like tricky. I was getting a bunch of events, but I was only interested into, like, let's say, grouping them into like categories. So like 3 or 4 events meant one thing for me. So I created an enum where if I got any of these 3 events, it was sending one thing down the stream, and then 3 or 4 events meant one thing for me. So I created an enum where if I got any of these 3 events, it was sending one thing down the stream, and then 3 or 4 events meant one thing for me. So I created an enum where if I got any of these 3 events, it was sending the same for the other events. So I was transforming the stream, and then on the other end, receiving less events. Let's just put it like that. So pretty interesting stuff. I kind of understand the concept of stream builder. Yeah.
And I was saying in the chat too, not to be too distracting to the wonderful presentation that was going on, but just as you showed at the beginning of the presentation, the whole notion of async star function and a yield can basically not only produce streams, but also consume multiple streams and build an aggregate output from that. And you can, anything you can code, you can have. And that's the best part, is any stream transformation. When the people ask me, is it possible? Yes, it's code. We know code. We know how code works. So yeah, definitely look into async star. Also look into sync star, which uses the same yield to create iterables. So you could effectively have an infinite stream of iterable values coming from a sync star with yield, which is really sort of fun. So check all that stuff out.
So is the iterable implicit? Like if you've written a value, or do you have to written an iterable implicitly? Like you have to say, okay, it's a sync star, and I want to written an iterable of like maybe integers or.
Yeah, it's a fully typed thing. So you can say iterable int, iterable num, iterable string, and then your yield could be a string or your yield could be a num. It has to be the same type, of course. But it can be consuming streams of ints and then turn that into an iterable that you would put into a for loop, for example, of strings. It's mix and match. It's Lego.
That's awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for the presentation. That's really, really helpful.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed setting up all the slides and code and stuff. So.
Yeah, so the next presentation we have is on, right now it's on July 6th with Flutter Toronto. It's like an introduction, but I'm planning to move it to like the second Tuesday. I'm not expecting a lot of people, but if any one of you is interested to join, I think Tyler and Emeka are going to join that meetup. And also on July 27th, Lens is going to talk about, he's going to walk through his chat app, and a couple of Flutter Vancouver folks are going to talk about white labeling, how to enable white labeling of apps using Flutter. I think Brando, maybe if you want to give a talk, and if you want to have more people, I guess August 30th would be the date. Adam Hammer, I think he's part of the Realtor company. He's gonna give a demo of his tool that he created. I think it's a puzzle tool, and yeah, and also you can probably give a talk to on August 30th if you're interested. Yeah, how does that sound, Brando? Is it something you're interested in?
So I have to check my calendar. I can't be in 3 places at once ever, and 2 places is also pushing it. So I just have to know what I'm doing. What was the date again? Did you say?
I'm just going to give you. It's August 31st.
Well, that's a long ways away. I have no idea what I'm doing that far out. Wonderful. It's pretty wide open, but all these things fill in soon. But yeah, I can do something, I think. So pencil me in, don't pin me in.
Okay, so there is a slot on August 10th, but again, not a lot of people will show up. But we do record all the sessions, and then we share them on our social platforms.
Cool.
So if August 10th and not a lot of people showing up works, then August 10th is another day.
Yeah. Maybe someday I can get famous.
I think you are.
That was really sarcastic. Well, piled on really heavily. Yes.
Yeah. Case, I remember you mentioned that you are a GDG organizer. Maybe you want to talk about yourself a little bit. Maybe introduce yourself.
Um, I mean, we started this year and we're still figuring things out in our chapter.
Where are
So,
you?
in Iraq,
Nice.
yeah, it's like 5 a.m. here.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah. Thank you.
Wow, thanks for joining. That's crazy.
How's that? You're just starting as a GDG lead?
We had a team in this chapter, but they needed more people, and me and my brother offered to join, and we're still figuring things out. We organized the last Dev Fest. It was in October last year, I believe. And since then, we haven't done much activities, and we're still figuring out stuff. Locating time is really hard these days. I don't know why, even though we are staying at home all day long.
Rexan, whose name is Jainam, he's joining from India. I think it's like maybe 7 a.m. in the morning now.
Yes, 8 in the morning.
8 in the morning. Thank you, Jen.
Now I'm
Emeka
really
is,
honored.
Emeka is from Mississauga.
Yeah, from Mississauga.
Yeah, so he's on the eastern. It's like 10:33 right now.
Yeah, 10:33. Actually rained today.
It rained.
Yeah, like 4 hours on none.
Oh yeah, I
Then-
heard
Dude,
like Ontario and stuff had a storm earlier.
What?
Yeah, like
Wow.
everyone's power was going out. Like they have a storm and then we have like a heat wave over here.
Yeah.
Weird, right?
But guys, I'm gonna stop recording now.